In 2025, global economic tensions soared to unprecedented heights, sending shockwaves through financial markets and diplomatic circles alike. The world watched anxiously as uncertainty gripped investors, businesses, and governments, all bracing for the fallout of a new and unpredictable era in international trade. The catalyst was the Trump administration's unveiling of the Liberation Day tariffs, a sweeping 10% baseline imposed on nearly all U.S. imports. This bold move was framed as a way to protect American industries and jobs, but it sent immediate ripples through the intricate web of global commerce, raising costs for businesses and consumers alike. The announcement jolted global markets, triggering sharp sell-offs and heightened volatility. Investors scrambled to reassess risks, while economists warned of a new era defined by aggressive economic nationalism and unpredictable trade maneuvers. The world's major economies braced for a period of instability and shifting alliances. Countries with significant trade surpluses like India were hit even harder. For them, tariffs soared as high as 26%, threatening to upend key partnerships and disrupt established supply chains. The impact was immediate and severe, putting immense strain on diplomatic and economic ties. The policy, wrapped in political theater and nationalist rhetoric, drew sharp criticism from economists, business leaders, and international organizations. Many argued it undermined the rules-based international trading system, risking a dangerous spiral of retaliation and escalating trade wars that could destabilize the global economy. For India, these tariffs were more than just an economic challenge. They became a test of diplomatic resolve and economic resilience. Indian officials scrambled to negotiate exemptions and minimize damage, while business leaders sought new strategies to adapt to the rapidly changing landscape. Although the full 26% tariff was temporarily paused until July, the 10% baseline remained firmly in place. This created a climate of deep uncertainty for Indian exporters, who faced tough decisions about pricing, supply chains, and future investments. Meanwhile, the Trump administration's chaotic global strategy included a high-profile tariff truce with China, even as it ramped up pressure on traditional allies. This unpredictable approach left many nations questioning the future of their economic relationships with the U.S. The Liberation Day tariffs marked the opening salvo in a new, more intense chapter of global trade wars, one defined by uncertainty, shifting alliances, and the ever-present risk of escalation. In spring 2025, the Indian subcontinent teetered on the edge of war after a terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir. Outrage in India led to Operation Sindoor, a 100-hour military conflict marked by missile, drone, and airstrikes across the line of control. The world watched anxiously as two nuclear-armed neighbors exchanged fire, raising fears of a wider war. Behind the scenes, frantic diplomacy urged restraint. The breakthrough came on May 10th, a ceasefire negotiated directly between Indian and Pakistani military commanders. This direct military-to-military contact bypassed political posturing and halted the bloodshed. The ceasefire was fragile but crucial, ending immediate hostilities. It was a hard-won peace, achieved through military pressure and pragmatic decision-making. The region stepped back from the brink, at least for now. As the dust settled, Washington claimed credit for the India-Pakistan ceasefire, linking it to the threat of U.S. tariffs. Trump officials argued that economic pressure, especially the looming 26% tariff on Indian goods, was key leverage in persuading both sides to de-escalate. They presented this narrative in court, framing tariffs as instruments of American diplomacy and peacemaking. The message, U.S. economic might, could achieve what traditional diplomacy could not. This account, however, was met with deep skepticism in South Asia. Many in India saw the claim as simplistic and self-serving, ignoring the region's complex realities. India, committed to bilateralism, rejected the idea of American mediation via economic threats. A direct clash of narratives between New Delhi and Washington was inevitable. India's response was swift and unequivocal. Its security decisions were not influenced by U.S. trade policy. The government made it clear that national security is a matter of principle, not negotiation. Indian officials, standing before the press, projected a unified front, determined to dispel any doubts about the independence of their decision-making process. The Ministry of External Affairs publicly clarified that trade and tariffs were never discussed during the military crisis. Instead, the focus remained firmly on the immediate security situation, and the need to de-escalate tensions through direct channels. India emphasized that the ceasefire was achieved solely through direct military communication with Pakistan, upholding its long-standing policy of bilateralism. This approach, rooted in decades of diplomatic tradition, ensures that sensitive issues are resolved without interference from external actors. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar reiterated that India's dealings with Pakistan are strictly bilateral, with no room for third-party mediation or economic inducements. He stressed that India's foreign policy is guided by its own interests and values, not by pressure or incentives from abroad. The message was unmistakable. India manages its own security and rejects any form of external leverage. This stance is not just about policy, but about national dignity and self-respect. This was more than a rebuttal. It was a declaration of national sovereignty. India's leaders wanted the world to know that their decisions are made in New Delhi, not dictated from foreign capitals. India's stand signaled that its core interests are not for sale or barter. The country's resolve was evident in every statement, every gesture, and every diplomatic move. By drawing a clear red line, India asserted its autonomy on the world stage. This was a message not just to one nation, but to all, that India's sovereignty is non-negotiable. In a murky geopolitical landscape, this was a moment of defining clarity, a powerful reminder that, for India, sovereignty is both a right and a responsibility, fiercely protected and proudly proclaimed. While diplomatic narratives clashed, the U.S. Court of International Trade delivered a decisive blow to the Liberation Day tariffs. The court ruled the tariffs unlawful, finding the president had overstepped his authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA. The ruling blocked the tariffs, siding with those who argued the executive branch was encroaching on congressional powers. Notably, the court rejected the administration's claim that tariffs helped broker the India-Pakistan ceasefire, calling it legally irrelevant. This validated India's position and embarrassed the White House. The decision reaffirmed that regulating foreign commerce is Congress's domain. The Trump administration appealed, but the ruling stood as a pivotal check on executive power. The legal defeat was as much a diplomatic victory for India as a domestic setback for Washington. The court's decision hinged on the separation of powers. Judges found that the administration's use of IEP, meant for specific emergencies, did not justify broad, sweeping tariffs based on trade deficits. The power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, the court emphasized, belongs to Congress. The Liberation Day tariffs were seen as a fundamental usurpation of legislative authority. The court dismissed the argument that the India-Pakistan ceasefire could retroactively justify the tariffs. Geopolitical claims, it ruled, cannot override constitutional constraints. The decision set a precedent limiting future presidents' ability to weaponize trade policy without clear congressional approval. Despite the diplomatic and legal drama, India and the US kept trade talks alive. Both sides remained committed to a long-term vision boosting bilateral trade to over $500 billion by 2030. Negotiations covered market access, intellectual property, digital trade, and investment, each a complex challenge. Tariffs remained a sticking point, with India demanding full exemption as a strategic partner. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar insisted any deal must be fair and balanced, not one-sided. India's stance reflected its growing confidence and refusal to accept a subordinate role. The path to deeper economic ties is winding, requiring patience and flexibility. The future hinges on building a framework that respects both nations' interests and sovereignty. The India-US standoff is part of a larger story, a global trade order under strain from rising economic nationalism and great power rivalry. As countries turn inward to protect their own interests, the established rules of international commerce are being tested like never before. The world is witnessing a shift where alliances are fluid and economic decisions are increasingly shaped by political calculations. Tariffs and sanctions are now tools of geopolitical leverage, blurring the line between commerce and conflict. These measures, once rare, have become common instruments for nations seeking to assert their influence or punish rivals. The impact is felt not just by governments, but by businesses and consumers around the globe as uncertainty grows and costs rise. Countries are forced to navigate between competing blocs, reshaping supply chains and strategies. Multinational companies are rethinking their operations, while governments weigh the risks and rewards of new partnerships. The global map of trade is being redrawn, with new routes and alliances emerging in response to shifting power dynamics. India's independent foreign policy and refusal to link security to trade concessions highlight its strategic autonomy. By charting its own course, India demonstrates a commitment to national interests, even when faced with pressure from larger powers. This approach allows India to engage with multiple partners without compromising its core values. By resisting US tariff tactics, India positions itself as a key player, not a follower. Its assertive stance signals to the world that it will not be easily swayed or coerced, and that it seeks to shape rather than simply react to global developments. India's stance offers a model for middle powers seeking to maintain sovereignty amid great power competition. As more countries look for ways to assert their independence, India's example provides a blueprint for balancing national interests with global responsibilities. Its actions reinforce the case for a multipolar, rules-based global order. By advocating for fairness and inclusivity, India helps to ensure that the voices of smaller and emerging nations are heard on the world stage. India's role is that of a balancing power, advocating for stability and equity. Through active diplomacy and principled negotiation, India works to bridge divides and promote peaceful solutions to complex challenges. In this contested era, India's principled stand shapes the future of international relations, offering hope for a more balanced and cooperative world order. India's handling of the tariff dispute sets a powerful example for nations facing economic coercion. The New Delhi Doctrine asserts that sovereign decisions, especially on security, are non-negotiable in trade disputes. India's clarity, consistency, and legal vindication created a robust defense against external pressure. This approach demonstrates that principled, well-articulated stances can counter economic intimidation. India's example may embolden other developing nations to assert strategic autonomy. By pushing back against unilateral actions, India reinforces multilateralism and rules-based order. The world need not be dictated by a few powerful nations. The New Delhi Doctrine offers a path for others to stand firm in a turbulent world.